to Desire to Inspire. This is your mama's favorite podcast. As you can see, it's not just me and Freddie today. We got my man Ryan Dreyer. Ryan is he was my Ironman coach when we were going for that whole thing. But Ryan is a beast. He's a coach, he's an entrepreneur, he's a husband, he's a dog dad, he's all kinds of things. So Ryan, why don't you kind of introduce yourself a little bit?
Yeah, what's going on? Thank you guys for having me on. I'm super pumped to chat. I'm into a lot of different things. I like to do endurance sports. I like to help people get into endurance sports. I'm into internet business, kind of making something out of yourself and monetizing your interests. I got a dog that I love deeply, got a wife that I love deeply. From Philly, and I'm here in Philly right now visiting some family, but I live in Colorado, moved out to Boulder this past January. So from 30,000 feet, that's probably the view.
Yeah, there you go. So I obviously know a bit about you. I mean, we haven't even really got in like super deep ourselves, but I know Freddie isn't really familiar with you at all. So I kind of just want to kind of give him a background, which I kind of wanted to get myself as well. Kind of like, I know that you weren't always like this fitness guy. So like it more was like a transition out of college. So kind of touch on that a little bit and like how you kind of got into fitness in the first place.
Yeah, so like I've always been like really interested in fitness, but I guess I'd say that like I struggled to like achieve fitness myself for a long time. My initial kind of dive into fitness was P90X. My buddy, my best friend and I in high school did it in our senior year. And I was just like hooked, like the daily repetition of it, the progress of it, doing it with him was huge for me. And so I was kind of like a chunkier kid and I was kind of chunkier throughout most of high school. So kind of leaning up and building some muscle was really big for me. And I maintained that mostly through college. But I kind of fell back onto some poor eating habits and some poor overall choices at the end of college and was kind of in a real rut on kind of what I was doing with my life. And so I've kind of been on this kind of fitness journey, I guess, overall for like at least a decade, but like kind of rebounding from a big slip up for probably the last 7 or 8 years. And for a long time, it was like lifting stuff. Like I did a lot of Corey G's programs. I did a lot of Julian Smith's programs. That was a big one for me, the Daily Pump. And I was always really interested in that. But a lot of my goals in the beginning were like vanity based. Like I wanted to look good. I wanted to impress other people with my physique. And so that always just had me like grasping at straws. And I never understood the nutrition piece of it. So like I'd still be going out and drinking every weekend, drinking, at happy hour multiple nights a week and using the gym just to kind of tread water and stay afloat. And a couple years ago, I guess I got introduced to endurance sports, mostly through Rogan's podcast, hearing guys like Cam Hanes, Courtney Dowalter, Goggins, even like Jesse Itzler, just doing it, kind of on a whim, the way that he goes about them. And that just seemed super interesting to me, like the mental side of everything and the accomplishment that I could sort of hear, radiating out of them. I was like, damn, I'm not getting this in the gym right now. I really feel like I want this in my life. So when I was 26, I decided to buy a road bike and get into triathlon. And my big goal at the time was just to complete a 70.3. That was kind of as big as my mind could go then. And it's been a couple year journey since then. I've now, I did a 70.3. I qualified for the World Championships. I raced there. I've now done 2 full Ironman.
Was that your first endurance event?
So I did a couple of triathlons like leading into that one,
Okay.
but that was my first 70.3 that I qualified at.
Okay.
And so I kind of got to burst on the scene a little bit because I had been training for like 2 years and not able to race because of COVID and whatever
Right.
else. So like at the time I was like, damn, I just want to race. I want to race. I want to race. And I had to wait a while, but having waited a while, I showed up way more trained and prepared than I would have otherwise. And so, yeah, now, I'm just like hooked on them and I have been for a while and I now coach people in them. I help get people into them. I just had my first athlete do a 70.3 this past weekend, Brian Riley. And I have done a couple of ultra marathons as well. So I help people with those. I just had my athlete, Louis Rivolo, nail a 100-mile ultra. So I'm kind of building out a coaching business and kind of a brand with that as well. And it's kind of been the intersection of my entrepreneurial interests as well as my own personal interests.
Forgot to say, dude, repping the brand today. Travel training.
Yeah,
Yes,
dude,
sir.
I saw that when the camera popped on. I appreciate that, dude. I love
Oh,
it.
always, dude. I was actually just telling Freddie about Louis before we hopped on here. I was like, Ryan kind of put out this thing. He needs to sign a podcast. And obviously, I've connected with Louis. I was like, this dude's a beast. We definitely got to get him on.
Yeah, dude, he's got a wild story. He is 57 years old and doesn't look it, doesn't sound it, doesn't, I don't know, anything it. And
Yeah.
he's a really inspiring dude, and I'm very fortunate to work with him.
Oh, yeah. Freddie, what do you got? I know Freddie was doing a deep dive on you yesterday. This guy got like 4 pages of notes on Ryan Dreyer. He probably got more info than I do.
Yeah, dude, I'm like so hit or miss on understanding where my stuff's coming on Facebook. I'm like not good at my Facebook app versus if I'm on the website. And I saw some notification from Freddie liking something from my trip with Zach Homel last year. So I'm like, damn, I didn't even know if I was friends with Freddie or how he's seeing anything, but I know that they're diving deep into it. So I'm excited. It was making me more excited to chat with you guys.
Oh yeah.
Yeah. No, I was telling Dylan, I was like, I wanted to get to know him and I wanted to see, kind of who you were before you started down this journey. Because as you know, Dylan and I are early on in this like mental and physical health journey to try and bridge the gap between both of them. So that way we can show the correlation that they both have. So I was like, let me see what Ryan used to do before he got into this or who he was. And so there was definitely a lot of interesting things that I wrote down I want to touch on. But as you just brought up your thing with Zach Holm, I thought that was awesome. The one-on-one retreat that you guys did.
Yeah, so I had hired Zach to help me build out my coaching business November of I guess 2020. And then we went on a one-on-one retreat in February of 2021 and kind of just stepped into the woods, put the phones away, and kind of built out the idea that has eventually become my coaching business. At the time, I didn't even really know what I was building. So I was kind of putting together like a course almost that I was eventually intending to like sell or offer. But I've kind of taken a couple different turns since then and allowed it to evolve and iterated on it. But that's kind of the idea of what we were getting up to that weekend.
Yeah, that's awesome. I saw also the video that when you broke the ice and jumped into the river there.
Yeah.
So I know that you do a lot of with like breathing exercises and stretching. And I think that's one thing that I am starting to get into in terms of like, how can you help the body recover from all of the things that we put it through? And I know that there's a lot of mental benefits from from that kind of stuff as well. So I kind of wanted to hear your take on your focus when it comes to stretching and preparing the body, I guess, for the, like, you could say beating that we give it when we work out or we do these ultra marathons, triathlons.
Yeah, so I think that like I kind of view stretching from like a really general perspective. Like most people are just super tight. Most people are tight in their hips, tight in their low back. They're not flexible at all. And I was never someone who was flexible. Like I dreaded the presidential fitness test in elementary and middle school because I could never even touch the sit and reach thing to make that bar move. And as I've just learned about yoga and learned about, the fascial network in the body, I've just gotten more interested in becoming more flexible and just putting a little bit more time into stretching and into mobility. And, there's a few different routines that I generally lean on. But for the most part, like to me, it's all just about like feeling good and allowing your body to just like relax a little bit. Like everybody's so wound up and tight. And like, even myself, like I still sit too much and most people are sitting all day. And so to me, it's just like, if I can allow my body to just like relax and breathe a little and just chill out, like that just simple concept has allowed my body to perform and feel just so much better on an everyday basis. And it's allowed me to do more with my body from like a physical exercise standpoint. And then when I loop it in after exercise, I'm really big on just like mobility type stuff and kind of flush outs and using the rolling stick a lot after runs and rides, just to make sure that my body can do it, right? Because like the idea of endurance sports is like, you're not going to enjoy them or get good at them if you cannot do them consistently. And you can only do them consistently if you are paying attention to your recovery. So there's like probably like, a dozen different things that kind of circle the whole recovery model that I use. But a big one is just making sure that I'm eating clean. Now that I've cleaned up my diet a lot the past couple of years, like it's so noticeable when I stray from that. And I kind of struggle mentally, like with when I do stray from it and allowing myself to, and still keeping my eating habits in check and not allowing some of my old habits to like rear their ugly head. But as long as my eating's good, keeping up with my hydration, my electrolyte intake, using little tools like rolling stick after I run and ride, a foam roller in the morning to kind of loosen up my back a little bit. Stuff like that really goes a long way. And when people think about like doing these ultras or doing Ironman or whatever else, it's like they think so much about like the effort itself. Like, oh my God, how could I ever run 100 miles? How could I ever do an Ironman? And so much of it is like just putting a little bit of effort towards the smaller stuff so that the bigger stuff just rises naturally with the overall effort.
Okay. Yeah. I saw one of your pictures when you just spoke on eating habits, that the picture of you when you weren't eating carbs during a race, and then a picture of you when you were eating carbs during a race. So that was something I wanted to touch on, because I feel like carbs have such a negative connotation or perspective in people's minds, that they either make you gain weight or that you can only have limited carbs. So I know that you've done plant-based. I know you've done carnivore. So kind of getting into that to show people the value of nutrition and how important it actually is to results.
Yeah, so the nutrition part of the endurance sports has been like the biggest light bulb to go off for me. And I was doing a lot of low carb stuff last year. I was doing a lot of training sessions fasted. And for that first Ironman that I did, I still had carbs in it, but I didn't have any carbs going into it. So I didn't have any carbs before. I did like a fatty coffee kind of thing before. So I had some MCT oil. I had some collagen peptides or whatever they're called. So I did have some calories, but nothing to add to my glycogen stores. And what I've ultimately learned is that like when you reach a certain intensity in exercise and your heart rate kind of gets above maybe 80% roughly, like your body starts looking around for glycogen, and glycogen just comes from carbs. So it's just like, if you're going to be doing endurance events and you're going to be pushing the body to that level of effort, you're going to be hurting yourself if you're not taking in carbs. So I think that one of my biggest learnings from that first Ironman was just that my intensity effort and my heart rate was not aligned with my fueling strategy. And when I started to take in carbs on the bike, I was just like playing catch up. You can't really play catch up with nutrition. It's kind of like if you have surgery and you're trying to, manage the pain, it's like you have to always be ahead of it. And if you slip up at all, you're never getting back ahead. So that was really one of the big learning lessons. I mean, I think that for me, the biggest thing that I've learned about carbs, or like probably the most impactful just fact on carbs, is that they make your body retain water. For every gram of carb that we take in, the body retains 3 to 4 grams of water. And so a lot of times, especially if you're eating processed carbs, you're tending to overeat them. So you're eating too many. Then your body is also holding on to a ton of water. So you're full, you're inflamed, and you feel like shit. And so when people remove carbs from their diet, they can immediately lean up because they're going to shed water weight. Their body's not going to be holding on to as many carbs. But overall, like depending on the training that you're doing, you definitely should be having some kind of carbs. It's really funny. Like, I guess my perception on protein, carbs, and fat these days is just like super simple. It's like you should be eating a gram of protein per pound of body weight. And everything else after that is basically calories in, calories out. Really, the only reason I think low fat diets have ever worked is just because fat is more calorie dense than carbs and protein. So when people crash their fat, they're eating less total calories, but it's not so much that a carbs are a bad thing. It's more just that we should figure out how to use them appropriately. One other thing that's been great for me too is just understanding like, I should be eating carbs around energy expenditure. Like for somebody who's just working like a normal job and maybe not training in the morning, like they absolutely do not need to be sucking down like a big carb heavy breakfast with like a big sugary coffee mid-morning and then like probably another carb heavy lunch. It's all related to how much energy we're putting out and how much energy we need to take in.
Love that. Yep. That's interesting about the carbs too. I didn't realize some of those points that you made. So thank you for sharing that. Dylan, what you got, man?
Oh, I thought you were going back.
I don't want to. I can keep going. I don't want to take too much of the shine. I
don't really care. I mean, it's a good conversation. I definitely think I think in the endurance space event, especially, that the idea of carbs not being bad it's not really a thing. I think it's more like general health seekers anyway. Like I think that they're the ones who are like, oh, I can't eat that. It's too many carbs, this and that. But excuse me. I guess we can get into kind of how you took it from like transition from just an endurance athlete to kind of this coaching standpoint. And I know that one thing Freddie had brought up today was your dog collar thing and like those little bandanas you used to make. He thought like you don't still do that, do you?
I still have about 2,000 units of inventory sitting in my garage that I am probably just going to donate.
He was like, yeah, dude, he owns this other business. I said, I actually don't think he does that anymore. I think like that was the start of his entrepreneurial journey. But if you kind of want to like go through the whole process of starting that and then kind of transitioning into like where your passion actually lied.
Yeah, I love it. So my first business was called Toasted Rye, and it was a dog bandana and dog owner accessory business. And the whole idea of it really stemmed from when we lived in Nashville, my wife and I, and we got our dog. We'd always go to these farmers markets on the weekend, and there'd always be this one vendor that it was this girl, and she was selling dog bandanas, and we loved them, and we'd always get them for Jameson. And in my mind, I'm like, I can do that. And I've always wanted to be an entrepreneur, and I've always wanted to have some type of creative endeavor that was like part of who I was and what I was up to. But I really struggled to figure out like what it is that I wanted to do. And I started listening to a lot of Gary Vee. I think this was in like August of 2019. And I remember I like listened to an episode of his podcast. And by the second episode, I had made the Instagram. I had decided on the business. I was like, I'm just going to start this and figure it out. So I didn't know how to sew. I didn't know how to do anything like that. I borrowed my sister's sewing machine that had been like stashed in my mom's basement in the house here. And I kind of just figured it out. I really started with like the local market and started to like build just sort of like a little bit of a local following in Philly. And was really just like going to Joann Fabrics, buying fabric and sewing triangles. And it was like the simplest thing that I could create. I was super locked on to the idea of physically making whatever I was doing. I'm not really sure why, but that was just like stuck in my head. I was like, I need to make it because I really didn't know like what else am I going to offer. So I iterated through that a bunch. I started with like just generic designs that I'd get at Joann Fabrics. I eventually got into like designing some of my own stuff and sourcing some manufacturers in China, getting collars and leashes made. And I guess just like the whole idea of that was me just sort of like betting on myself and just saying that this is mine. I'm putting my name on this and I'm putting this out there into the world. One thing that I struggled with like a ton, and I probably still struggle with it more than I really think, but just like worrying too much about what other people think of me and really being concerned with that really led me to be living a life in my mid-20s that I was like very unhappy with. I was like, I have the good job, I have the, you know, the girlfriend or whatever at the time, and I have this and that, and I graduated college, and I've got all these boxes checked off, but there's still a massive hole in me that I don't understand how to fill. And that business really started to fill that hole in for me. And ultimately where I took it was, you know, getting a bunch of that inventory from China, like I had said. And truthfully, I kind of got cold feet with it eventually. I kind of iterated through selling on Etsy. I did some in-person farmers market kind of things. It was really just one pop-up at a dog park, but some in-person stuff. I hired a virtual assistant and got into like 10 local dog shops with this Philly design that I had made. Then I wanted to take it to Amazon. So I was like continually growing it. And I finally got it on Amazon. I made some more generic designs that were for the broader public, not just the Philly market. But I'd really sunk a lot of money into inventory. And by the time that I got it onto Amazon, I was like, shit, you know, I've spent 5, 6, 7, 8 grand on all these collars and leashes. And I'm not totally comfortable just like throwing my credit card down on Amazon ads and having no idea what I'm doing and potentially losing a lot of money. And that was kind of right around the time that my endurance stuff started to take off. Right around that time, I had just run 2 ultra marathons and I was just feeling completely limitless. Right around that time is when I did the carnivore and plant-based diet challenge. And so I like learned a ton about nutrition through that. And I had this kind of natural shift into the health space, which is kind of funny because my buddies, my like, core group of 3 or 4 friends growing up, we had this idea to like start this business around fitness when we were much younger, but none of us were nearly fit enough to actually like be the ones selling anything. So like finally I kind of got into the spot where I learned enough and I had tested enough on myself and I had done enough with myself that I was like, all right, like I'm actually worthy of being somebody who provides information and guidance to other people who want to do similar stuff to me. So that's really like where kind of the transition happened from like that first business into my coaching business. I signed my first client in May of 2021. So I just passed that last month. And I've iterated through my fitness offer a lot. I really started with like weight loss type stuff because at the time it was like that's kind of the thing that I've done. I was quite unhealthy and I kind of flipped that all around. And then fortunately, Louis, like, we mentioned Louis a minute ago, Louis came to me right around this time last year, maybe a little bit earlier in the end of May. And he wanted to run a 50-mile ultra. And so I helped him with that. And he had other goals related to running. He wanted to do a 5K PR. We hit that. He wanted to do a half marathon PR. We hit that. He ran the Philly Marathon in November, which was just the end of like an epic stretch of time for us tackling all these races. And ultimately like getting into that with him, like opened up some doors to other people wanting to learn about triathlon and wanting to learn about ultra marathon. And so it's kind of iterated a lot. And now my main focus is on triathlon and just endurance sports in general. So that's kind of like been sort of the progression from my entrepreneurial journey. And it's so funny to look back and just remember that I was sewing dog bandanas first and now I'm doing way different stuff.
Did you know Louis prior to him coming to you about that race?
No, he was just a homie on Twitter. I had seen some replies from him and I knew that he had been liking some of my stuff, but he just hit me up cold and was like, I think I can learn from you. And ultimately it's been like the most rewarding partnership I've ever made.
Twitter is honestly, dude, like such a crazy place. I keep telling Freddie we got to get him on there. He's not on there at all. Was that something that you were kind of utilizing before your trip with Zach, or did he kind of get you to implement that more?
So he definitely started to have me implement it when I started with him in that November. But like at the time I was still talking about like e-commerce stuff and the Amazon stuff. I'd been on Twitter for ages, but I had just done Twitter, the way that I think a lot of people do it, which is like I followed sports on there. I followed a lot of Barstool stuff, whatever, just general distractions I would kind of consume. So I didn't really use it from a personal brand standpoint at all. It's kind of funny too, to think back that like, Twitter is such a main part of my life right now. And it's such a huge driver for what I'm doing. And I used to have a couple of blogs. I was actually just looking through one of my old blogs the other day. My first like fitness related blog was called On Your Left. And it was like me documenting some of the cycling stuff that I was up to at the time. And like, now that I'm so into Twitter, I'm like, one of the main rules of like, creating a brand online is that you do not want to be taking people off of it first. Like creating a blog and making them go to an external site is just like a huge waste of time. Like you got to build it from the source itself. So that's kind of been my progression through Twitter. And it's honestly like been crazy to evolve from not sharing anything to, sharing everything, dropping pictures of what I'm doing multiple times a day, just like dropping my thoughts and what's going on in my head. It's been a great opportunity for me to just like think through things and like process my ideas more, having to formulate them into somewhat of a concise message that I try to write well has been just like a really fulfilling experience for me. And it's really like helped me evolve my thought process on a lot of things.
Yeah, I completely agree. It's like kind of like a therapeutic thing just to kind of get shit out there. But as we both know, we're gonna have some haters on there. So we kind of ran in. We talk about this a lot on here. Is like these people online and like negativity on social media and this and that. and like curating, which is kind of like what you said. It's not just like these distractions, but like really like making sure like your timeline is full of like the people who you want to see and who inspire you and like who have they're like-minded people.
Yeah.
But you know, we've ran into some of the same haters, and like, so how do you kind of navigate that part of Twitter?
You know, for me personally, one of the best things about Twitter is that it's allowed me to speak into existence who I want to be. And I used to just have too negative of a mindset. You know, my home growing up had a lot of anger in it, had a lot of like frustration and, you know, a lack of control of emotion, I think. And so that was really normalized for me. And as I have been able to really use Twitter to validate who I am and kind of direct who I want to be, I've just become insanely positive about it. And so as a result of that, I don't really run into haters that often, truthfully. Like I feel fortunate, you know, I don't like try to stray away from towing the line, but like most of what I put out, you know, I really feel like I'm still in the fight. Like I'm pursuing everything that I want to be, you know, pursuing. And so it's rare that I get somebody to come at my neck about anything, but you know, a couple of weeks ago, the cat's ass was coming in. Roguest username of all time, the cat's ass. But yeah, coming in and chirping me for being a triathlon coach, you know, without having gone sub 10 at an Ironman. Chirping me for not doing as well as I wanted to do at Ironman Texas. And it's tough, dude. Like I'm human. It doesn't feel good to get talked shit on. And one of the biggest things that I've had to work through is like thinking that people are talking shit on me. Like that was a huge thing with Toasted Rye, was like just even if I didn't even know what I was talking about and just playing it all up in my head, like just getting through those thoughts was more important than whether those thoughts were actually real or not. So for me, like how I kind of handled that is like, you know, I just got to force myself to block that person. You know, it's hard. It's hard to not reply. It's challenging. But then like, you know, there's like a dog in me that's like, at least about my personal accomplishments and like not doing well enough at Ironman Texas. You know, there's a part of me that's like, he's right. And I should fucking listen to that. And I should train harder and I should be better. And I should expect more of myself. So I try to flip it and try to use it to my advantage. Yeah. But I mean, there's no denying that it's not fun to see.
Yeah. I think a lot of people would take it the other way. So that's definitely a good way to reframe it.
Did you respond to him or did you just push it under the rug and leave it?
No, I just pushed it under the rug. I did not reply.
I think everyone else responded for you, because that's a guy that I blocked last week on air, Freddie, because it was consuming too much of my time. I will let you know though, Ryan. I think he's got a bot account out there, so I'll send you that one if you want to block it too.
Oh yeah, hit me with that.
Joey pointed out to me. He said, "Hey, has this guy hit you up yet?" And the only person who follows him is the cat's ass. Like he's responding kind of the same way. It's like, all right, here we go. He's back.
Yeah. And that guy specifically, like I had checked out his page and he had been talking some shit on Matt Izzo. Yeah. He had been talking some shit on Zach for whatever reason. And so, you know, for me, like I look at that and I'm like, shit, dude, like that is a very real person that's out there. And that dude, like, I don't want to act like I'm above that dude, but like that dude is struggling with some shit that he's taking out on other people through something that's completely unimportant related to like his life. Like it's a group of dudes trying to do an Ironman and it's me trying to qualify for Kona and it's me trying to coach people into endurance sports. Like that dude's upset about things and he's deciding to use what we're doing as like a channel to release that, which is just unfortunate to see, because I feel like I've worked through a lot of things that, I mean, I don't think that I used to like shit on people like that, but like I used to definitely like be more negative and I used to like lash out at random shit. And I'm sure if I went through every internet account I've ever had that I've probably commented some negative shit and said some things that I wish I could take back. So I just kind of view it from that lens.
Yeah, that's why I asked if you responded to him, because you brought up Gary Vee earlier, who I have followed for a long time as well, and who I think has a lot of great insight. And he was just on Logan Paul's podcast, which we're bringing up again, Dylan, but he was on there and he was saying Logan Paul went through something similar. A guy was talking shit on him for a project that he was doing. And Gary's like, just respond and say, you know, thank you. Sorry I hurt your feelings. Hope that, you know, whatever, and explained his side of it. And he was like, responding with empathy is a lot better than responding with anger, because they're struggling with something internal that we don't know about. And so typically when they're talking crap, but it seems like this guy's talking shit to a lot of people, they're struggling with their own internal battles. And then once they get the attention or satisfaction that you responded, and if it's in an empathetic way, then they're usually like back off and apologize for it because of what they're going through.
Yeah, I agree with that completely. And like another kind of perspective that I have on it is just that like some people can't help themselves. Like I heard this thing a couple months ago that was like suggesting that some people are like legitimately addicted chemically in their brain to the release of certain chemicals that come out when they lash out and when they express anger and when they express rage. So it's like while these people aren't like quote enjoying being mad and saying a bunch of negative shit, like in that moment they're feeling good. And I got to be empathetic with the fact that their brain is chemically not how I want mine to be.
Right.
Yep. Yeah, in your one story where you or one of your posts where you talk about the comparison of when you were at like pretty much your lowest, where you were your heaviest versus working on getting your body back right. You said something along the lines of, I wasn't able to work on my mental health until I fixed my physical health or something along those lines. Is that when you would say was the time frame of when you were like lashing out or making comments on people's posts, is when you weren't happy with yourself, like physically?
I'm sure. I don't totally know like specifically. I think that like kind of when I say that I used to be more negative and that I've probably said some negative things online, it's probably more just related to like how I carry myself and just like the standard that I set for myself. You know, when I spoke about just being really controlled by other people's opinions of me, you know, a huge downside of that is that I didn't hold myself to a standard that I even knew. So like, as I've just kind of worked through that stuff and just grown up a little bit, like just setting good values and trying to live by those in different circumstances has really helped me out a lot. And just like making a big positive physical transformation has really improved my relationship with myself mentally. Because I just always kind of suffered with that before I got the physical stuff right. And it's not like I'm perfect mentally now, but I know that I can use my nutrition and my exercise to make me feel good about myself, which is just like a life-changing tool to have in my arsenal, you know, compared to, you know, my previous days where like I would just eat something and be furious with myself or do whatever and just not feel good about myself.
Yeah. How do you transition that to your clients that you work with? If they hit a low, or if they hit a point where they're like, I don't know if I can push through, or mentally they're going through it, how do you try and help them see the final picture to be able to complete the task that they originally went out for?
Yeah, I mean, if people are kind of wavering on what they wanted to do with me, I mean, it's super important to understand what people have going on in the full scope of their life and where what we are working on is placed within that. And just bringing people back to their why, like, why are you doing this? Why did you sign up for this initially? And just making sure that people expect that it's not going to be perfect all the time. Like I love endurance sports and I love Ironman and triathlon. And there are days that I absolutely do not want to do it. Like even this morning, dude, like I had a really long day yesterday. I had a bunch of calls. We were down in the city doing something. We tried to go to our favorite Italian restaurant and it was closed. I just got back and I was just like, I needed to sleep so bad, and woke up this morning and I had an in-person training session with one of my athletes and I was super excited for it, but I just sort of felt worn down a bit. And so like, I could have just decided to cancel that, or I could have decided to give some excuse for that. But I just reminded myself that I stay true to my commitment, and this commitment is important to me in the scope of everything else that I'm doing. And just like acknowledging that it's human to go through phases of not wanting to do something, and it's human to have your motivation wane and wax. And that like my morning unfolded and I had a great session with that athlete, and I had a session of my own, like for a workout that I had to do afterwards, which kicked the shit out of me and it felt awesome. And so it's just like moments like that where it's like, damn, it's now 10:30 in the morning and I feel amazing having just accomplished this stuff. And I absolutely remember at 6 o'clock when my alarm went off that I was just like, ooh, I really wish I could go back to bed and sleep for 2 more hours here.
Yep.
Yeah, there's definitely a lot of that because I was in the same predicament like 2 weeks ago. So, I mean, I can definitely relate. And I think that was a big thing for me, was that I really didn't have a why. And like sometimes I think that there is that. So it was kind of like refocusing and trying to figure out my why. So definitely relate to you in that sense.
Yeah.
You got more notes, Freddie? Because this thing got 3 minutes. So for
I know I saw it
more.
at 3 minutes. I
Oh,
just
you
have
can
to
see it too.
Yeah, I see
All
it's
right.
like 3:41.
Yeah.
But yeah, real quick on your Texas experience, I saw your picture of the barbecue. Where'd you go when you were here?
Oh, you live in Texas?
Yeah.
Nice. Yeah, we hit Terry Black's in Dallas on the way down and
All right.
and on the way back. It was great.
Okay.
He's
Yeah,
in Dallas, right in his backyard.
Yep. Yeah,
Nice.
Terry Black's is like 3 miles down the road. So there's that and Pecan Lodge and a couple other ones. So I was curious when I saw your picture, which one you went to, see if it held up
Yeah.
to your standards or expectations.
Yeah, no, it was great. I mean, living in Nashville, you know, that the whole vibe of Terry Black's was very familiar to me from what the barbecue places were like in Nashville. And there were a couple of good barbecue places up in Philly. One was quite close to us that we went to a lot, but not like the whole experience like they've got at those type of joints. So I was really pumped to hit that up and absolutely felt like I earned a huge plate. I think that was my first time getting a beef rib. I told my wife Chelsea, I was like, all right, this is what I want to order. Like, I'll just sit at the table with the dog. She came back and she's like, yeah, this was $160. I'm like, oh, I didn't realize that the beef rib was quite that much, but I just did an Ironman. So if I'm ever going to drop 160 on barbecue, it's probably now.
Yeah, that's the time. That is the time.
Yeah.
Well, Ryan, I don't want to cut this short, but I know we're running out of time. So I wanted to thank you for jumping on and hearing your story, because I know that it's impactful. Like you said, starting a business, you have a lot of thoughts in your head on what the outside world is thinking or saying, when generally most people are cheering for you. So through your journeys and through your endeavors with the first company, now doing this training, what is one advice that you would give somebody, or what's the biggest lesson that you've learned throughout these years of doing this to kind of get people started and to see that there is hope if you put effort in, and kind of, just what your message, I guess, is that makes you you?
Yeah, I mean, the biggest one is that you just got to start. You got to get in the game. You got to start swinging away. I really love my journey. It's mine. Nobody has done it like me. Nobody will do it like me. And that's true for everybody. And I think that a lot of people who want to start a business or want to start a personal brand are probably just way too caught up in needing to create the perfect offer or the perfect opportunity or whatever else. And in reality, it's like, if you just get in the game and start just making a little bit of noise, like, you can't even wrap your mind around the opportunities that might be up around the bend. And if you had asked me when I was sewing dog bandanas in my basement, if I'd be coaching people across ultramarathon and Ironman finish lines, I would not understand how I got there. But over time and just staying in it has ultimately given me some opportunities that are just completely life-changing. And so if people are looking to start, they just got to start.
Love that.
All right. Well, Ryan, we definitely appreciate you coming on, brother. I'm afraid that this minute's going to cut off. So I'm going to drop all your links below so people can find you, follow you. People want to get coaching, they know where to go. But thanks again, dude. Appreciate you coming on. Love you, brother.
Absolutely. Love you guys.
Thanks,
Thank you for
Ryan.
having me on. We'll chat again.
For sure.
Have a good one.
Peace.